It is 6 o'clock, and I'm one of those that likes to start on time. So as I call the meeting to order, I want to welcome those of you here in attendance with us tonight, as well as those that are watching and those that may watch later. I have a few housekeeping items that I'd like to take care of before we move into the actual meeting. Since we don't have any clerical staff as yet, I have asked my school board assistant, Elizabeth Buswell, to take the minutes tonight. Does anyone on the board have an objection? She has volunteered to do this of her own free will.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I guess it's okay, Madam Chair.
So that way we have somebody that will be doing this, so she's graciously agreed. Also, I believe Commissioner May, he unfortunately was called out of town, but he is participating virtually. Commissioner May, are you with us? While we're waiting, since we don't really have any rules governing the process of virtual attendance, I would like to ask for a motion from this board to allow Commissioner May to participate and vote on the actions that we take tonight.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And, is there any discussion? In way of understand, I spoke with the chair of the board in Alachua County, and they said that this is how they've been handling it during the COVID problems. They just make a motion at the table on the night of the meeting, and that way everything is clear that everyone participating. So those in favor of allowing Commissioner May to participate virtually, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Opposed? Commissioner May, are you on? Okay. Okay. I was going to let him vote, but board members, I also took the liberty of creating a public input form. It's very basic, so that those that wish to speak tonight, they're found in the carousel back there. You fill it out and bring it forward to Ms. Buswell, and she'll get them to us. That way we'll have a record of those of you who wish to speak, and that contact information should we need to get in touch with you later. And if there's no objection, I suggest that we give them 3 minutes to speak. Seeing no objection, okay. And then I want to take a moment of personal privilege. I think we all are very grateful to the citizens who worked so passionately to get this referendum passed, to get our citizens to understand this opportunity that we've been given. But personally, I need to thank a few people. And number one is Kimberly Krupa. She has helped me get this agenda together. She has put me in touch with the right people to get things advertised. And I just welcome her assistance and really appreciate all the effort she has put into getting this started, as well as the effort she did in getting this initiative passed. She also helped us make sure we got everything advertised properly. I also want to thank Innisfree and Julia McQueen, because all of you received this lovely packet tonight of the handbook on special districts. And they made those copies for us, and they also have been very helpful in getting this initiative passed. Jennifer Grove for her assistance last month in doing the minutes. And then Ms. Buswell made copies of the bylaws with some additions, some edits that had been done for the meeting tonight. So I just wanted everybody to know that I'm not doing this by myself. I do have help, and I do appreciate each one of you that helped. As I said, we have received documentation that the meeting was advertised appropriately. It was put on the Trust website, it was on the county website, and it appeared in the Pensacola News Journal on Saturday, February 13th. Tonight, we also have with us virtually Michelle Watson, and at the proper time, she is going to walk us through the timeline and part of the discussion on the needs assessment. So at this time, I would like a motion to approve the agenda.
I motion that we approve the agenda.
Thank you,
Second.
Dr. Smith. Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Is there any discussion about on the agenda? Seeing none, those in favor of the adoption of the agenda, please raise your right hand. Those opposed, like sign. 4-0. Okay. Commissioner May. You all should have received a copy of the minutes from the January 21st meeting. Again, thank you, Jennifer. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes as presented? There are no objections. We'll just adopt the minutes as presented. Moving to our next item of business, we want a status update on the gubernatorial appointments. I think Ms. Gilly is here to do that for us.
Yes, thank you.
Good evening.
How are you? So, as you know, last Thursday, the board voted in a couple of rounds to come up with the 17 individuals that would be forwarded to the governor's office. I have their names. I think a
And
lot
some of them
are
are
actually in
here,
this
so if
room.
you
I know, it's
read their
great.
names, if they
Yes.
would stand, so
So,
that would
would
be
you like me to
nice.
read their names? So,
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Burgash, he was trying to get here, but he had another situation come up. I know Glenn Conrad,
He's here.
Celestine Lewis, Jennifer McFerrin. There's Commissioner May.
Oh.
Sarah Miller,
In
David-
person.
David Peden III, Pushel Schneer, Pastor Lonnie Wesley, Stephanie White, Irvin Williams, Tori Woods, Sarah Lefevre, sorry, I always say that wrong. Sorry, Sarah, please forgive me. Dave Merzen, Dr. Rex Northrup, Carol Setcon, and it says James Walker Wilson, but we all know that's Walker Wilson, and Brian Wire. So those are the 17 names, and we had a couple of them that had the last form that I think I mentioned to the commissioners last week that needed to fill them out. We just have a couple more that haven't come in yet. So as soon as they get in, our goal is to have these transmitted to the governor Thursday, Friday this week.
Okay,
So
so
we're
they
going to
haven't
transmit them. Pardon me?
They have not been transmitted yet.
No,
Somebody in the audience
we've
asked
got to,
me.
I would like to do one concise packet to the governor's office. I have been made aware that I think Mr. Wilson might be out of town, so we may have to do it if he's not back this week. He may, I'm sorry, I'm letting you know who didn't fill out their last page. But he may be the only one that, if he doesn't get his done, that goes separate later. So we're going to provide them in hard copy and also digitally, so they would have a way to manage them from that perspective.
Could you send me an email when you do that, so that
Yeah.
I'll know that they've been sent?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Question? Be sure that your mic is on. Thank you.
Explain to me what you mean by people haven't turned their forms in.
So the last page required basically an attestation or a notary to basically be the final, they had to swear basically that all the documents were true and accurate. So some of them just did not go, I hate to say the trouble, of getting a notary. They went on and got their applications turned in without having that notary page. That's it.
Okay, so I'm sorry, so this is an incomplete application, or this is something that was done after they were chosen?
That's a good question.
Yeah, so,
Thank you.
yeah. So, I mean, it was complete with the exception of the notarized statement. The rest of the application was complete.
And I think,
So what happened is some people don't have ready access to a notary, and I think they were working to get their applications in. And so if they were chosen, then we need to make sure we get that. If they weren't chosen, then they didn't have to find a notary.
and I think, are we going to go by titles or?
Well, if you would like to use my title in this particular question-answer session, I think that would be okay.
Well, I was going to say, the thing is, that was a process that the county commission did, so
I
we,
appreciate that.
yeah.
The county decided that they would
Yeah.
accept incomplete applications.
Yeah, I mean, we
Yeah.
did talk about it. I mean, myself and
Yeah.
my staff, we talked about the fact that that was the only page that we did find was not complete on several applicants. And when we did reach out, a couple of them were like, well, I didn't really have access, but I didn't want my application to not make it by the deadline. And so I don't think that's uncommon, and particularly because of the gubernatorial application being so complex, I don't think that's an uncommon thing that happens, even with the governor's office application that's pretty laborious.
But applications will be complete when we send it to the governor's office.
Oh, yes, we won't send any that haven't completed because they won't accept them.
But follow-up to that is we're delaying sending because applications are not complete. So this is delaying the process.
Yeah, I would say it's probably delaying it by about a week. Yes, ma'am. Because we did that the vote was last Thursday night, so I would say by this Thursday, we would have that complete.
So for clarification, are you saying that Mr. Wilson is the only application that's delaying the process?
I am not.
Okay.
There were
She said
several.
several.
Yes, there were
She said
several.
several.
And we did get several that responded immediately, and some are just having a little bit longer time to respond, but
How many do we have that don't have complete applications?
we have complete applications without that final page. There are 3.
That's just 3 outstanding? Oh,
Yes, and I fully expect those to be executed in the next day.
And could I ask that we wait and be recognized so that we're not talking over each other?
you're the chairman.
Thank you.
You're the chairwoman. You can ask anything you like.
Thank you. So do you have any insight as to timeline once they're submitted?
No, once we submit them to the governor's office, I will also make a phone call, and just make sure that we've transmitted them properly, that they've received them, and then, of course, ask if there's any opportunity for them to give us a time frame. As you know, sometimes in a gubernatorial appointments office, things can languish, so we would certainly not want that to happen. I would encourage all that are interested to continue to contact his office. And we'll make sure that we get you all the correct information so that the person that has our applications and that should be working on that to present that to the governor. I would say legislative session starts next week, so do not be surprised if that doesn't sometimes create some delays.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think we ought to recognize that Commissioner May is in attendance. Since we voted to have him attend virtually, we can now unvote that and recognize for the record that he is there in person.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Madam Chair, can I talk?
You may.
Oh, I don't have anything to say, but I just want to make sure you'll let me talk.
I just wanted to try to make sure that we observe some decorum.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
There's only 5 of us. I think we could probably figure that
I
out.
think we can. All right. So we're glad you're here. We're very glad to see you
I'm glad to be here. It took a little challenge to be here, so
Okay.
thank you.
All right, so the next item of business, we're going to have Michelle Watson from the Florida Children's Council, and she's going to take us through the next 2 portions of our agenda, which would be the, wait a minute, I'm having a mental break here. She's going to talk to us about the timeline and then about the needs assessment. So let's kind of get through the timeline section at a time, and then we can ask questions, and then she can move on to the next section. So we've got it as first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. Okay? Is that agreeable? All right. Michelle, so glad for you to be here with us, because I've called on you this last week or so and tried to get a little more knowledge in my brain about how we're doing this. So thank you so much. If you can walk us through this timeline that's being proposed.
Absolutely. So, there are in your new special district handbooks, which are very meaty and thick, that you have in front of you. You will have a lovely 260 pages of reading. There are required milestones that need to be met in order to receive funding. So when you're looking at your first quarter timeline, there are administrative tasks that are part of that timeline, and then there are things that need to be completed in order to be able to identify a budget and determine your ad valorem rate that you would like to assess this first year, in an effort to make sure that you are part of the TRIM process, which would ideally make sure that the Children's Trust receives money by November of this year. So with that being said, if you look at the first quarter timeline, you all obviously are here tonight to adopt some bylaws, appoint an interim executive director, and review the proposed budget through September 30th, 2021, and then adopt a regular meeting schedule. So those are really all just the process by which the trust will operate. And then below that, February through March, are more items that look as administrative. So how do you make sure that the structure's in place so that you can complete those milestones and tasks? So they are things such as securing office space, telephones, business cards, have a contact, open a bank account, really establish yourself as an entity, obtain a line of credit. That's really important that you do some of those prior tasks. Draft accounting practices and procedures. Those are things that the Florida Children's Council can help with, given that we also have another 9 members that already have those in place that you all can review and look at and determine if any of them you would like to adopt locally in your area. Recruit and hire an interim executive assistant, and then draft RFPs or recommendations for outside CPA audit and accounting software. Once again, we can help you with all of the RFPs that our other communities have so that you can move swiftly, taking the best options that represent the needs of your community from those RFPs and creating one. And then by then you'll hopefully be moving to your March meeting. As part of the March potential meeting, the TRIM budget training, one of the things that we've committed to doing is pulling together all of our finance directors around the state for a meeting this next month in March, and inviting both Escambia and Leon counties to participate. That meeting will help have the new communities understand, how do you approach TRIM? What are the processes around the TRIM notice? How do you identify a budget within that, which then sets your ad valorem? And then what does that process look like? And so one of those things, so once you get a few TRIM processes under your belt and understand those procedures, they become really second nature. And then what you'll need to do is obviously board action items. Then moving forward is a deep dive into the needs assessment process. We'll talk about the needs assessment and different ways that you can approach that. Your needs assessment is going to directly drive your first year budget, and some of the things that you all want to think about within the needs assessment process and verification will be how you will result in how you might want to address your budget for the first year, and your TRIM notice and your ad valorem setting. So that really takes us through the first quarter of 2021. And I'll stop there if there's any questions to get us through March, and see if anyone, if not, we'll move to the second quarter.
Any questions from anyone at this point?
Madam Chair, I got a question.
Yes.
It's a very good likelihood that the governor's appointments will not be in place by the March meeting. And there are some trainings in here that I think the entire board would benefit from. Is there an absolute necessity to do these trainings in March, or can they be done maybe in April when the board might be completely set?
So when I look at the first quarter trainings and I see deep dive into provider training and capacity building, I think that's more the process for how the trust would look at provider training and capacity building.
So that,
It would be your local process for how you all are going to approach provider training and capacity building based on the needs assessment process. So those two things are really tied together, and what you're wanting to accomplish as part of the needs assessment. And then once you have that needs assessment, how do you train your potential providers on how to serve the populations you identify as most important, as well as build capacity within service organizations to provide services.
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes.
So the question is that critical to be done in March, or could that be done in April when possibly all 10 of the board members will be sat? And I don't even know if it'll happen by April, but it seems that if we rush to do a lot of these trainings, we're going to have to do it again for the other 5 members at some point.
I think, I'll let Michelle answer, but we're probably going to have to kind of play that by ear. And because you know, in my conversations with the chair from Leon County, from Alachua County, you're Leon, you know, we're going to have to decide, do we want to move forward, or do we want to wait 45 days to see if things get done, or do we want to continue to wait? Because we're going to need to move forward with the planning process. And, you know,
Madam Chairman,
yes.
I concur with my fellow board member that if that training is going to have to be repeated, I don't see any point in doing it. I mean, the council consists of 10 people, and so whatever we do, we would have to redo it when the governor appoints it. So I'm only one vote, would say that we should do it when the entire board is set.
And Madam Chair, I don't know if I'm being clear with that item. It is not a training, meaning we're going to train the board. It is what are the aspects of provider training that need to be put in place in Escambia County to ensure that service providers are ready to provide services. So it's not necessarily a training for the board where you're going to have to train the board members. It's more of what are kind of the best practices amongst communities for working with service providers to get them ready to accept these new funds with accountability and metrics moving forward. So when it says deep dive, it really is looking at what's done before, what are the areas we can look at against the needs assessment, and what training needs to be developed for service providers moving forward.
Turn your mic on, please.
I'm used to it always being on until you turn it off. Okay. My only comment really, kind of in follow-up, is that we're kind of, again, dancing around the issue of what constitutes a quorum. And some of these suggestions about all of these things that we're going to accomplish tonight and in the next 30 to 60 days, I think goes back to that. And some of our decisions, like adopting an agenda, no problem. But when we start talking about some of these issues, I think we really need to talk about what we think constitutes a quorum.
Well, and I, if I might, and Ms. Watson can, because I've had a few conversations with her, I don't think those would take necessarily a vote. It's a discussion. And when we get further into my agenda, I am, before the end, we're going to talk about having to have some work sessions. And, you know, those are the kind of things that we can talk about. And if the majority of the board wants to put everything on hold, we can have that discussion. But, you know, we need to start talking about the capacity. We're gonna have funds in November. What is the capacity of our community to be able to fill out an RFP if we develop one? And those are the trainings. We're gonna have to figure out what kind of things. I'm a member of Impact 100, and we do trainings for the people out there that want to apply for grants, because not everybody knows how to do that. And so those are the conversations that we're going to have is what I'm thinking she's talking about is, you know, what do we see in our community are things that we're going to need to provide training for, not necessarily a vote at this point, but we can start discussing it so that when the others come on board, we're not waiting to start that point. We just say, these are things that we've talked about so far. Anyone else?
This is Walt again. My only concern here is that if something could be done in April as opposed to March, it would potentially be information that the other 5 members could receive as well as our 5 members. And I didn't know the criticality of March versus April. That was what I was trying to get to, and I haven't heard that answer yet as to why. Is there an urgency to get it done in March, or can it be done in the April meeting in case the 10 can be here?
That is absolutely a personal decision. When you look at beginning kind of with the end in mind, with a July requirement to have your budget submitted as part of the trim hearing, you all will need, as part of the procedures to justify the budget and the set ad valorem rate for whatever you move forward with understanding not only, one, the needs of the community, but 2, what is the capacity of the service providers in that community to meet those needs, and what is the likelihood of that capacity to be scaled to be able to spend the amount of dollars that you put in your budget with time and efficacy. So it's not necessarily that you can't do it in April. Just know that when you're compressing kind of that critical path, you're not going to have as much time potentially to discuss it from month to month if you're going to meet that July deadline.
So I think that's something, as we set our dates, we can certainly put that in April. I don't think that would be a problem. Dr. Smith, did you have something you were going to say?
The only thing I was going to bring up is the difficulty here is we're not exactly sure when we will receive those final board members. So there's probably a little bit of balancing here where I think we're going to have to keep our pulse on that and adjust accordingly. So just wanted to bring that point up.
So I'm thinking that we can certainly move the provider training and capacity building process at this point. If we want to move it to April, we can, but we can have that discussion after we get finished with the timeline.
Madam Chairperson?
Yes.
I concur with the superintendent. It's somewhat fluid, and I don't know if we should put a locked date on it.
Yeah.
Because it should be, I certainly wouldn't want to serve on a board in which rules, regulations, and bylaws have been established, and I didn't have input. So I agree with the superintendent. So, I mean, I don't know if it's March or if it's April, but I don't know if, is there a set date in which we should establish that?
All right. So do you want to make an amendment to the timeline?
I'll make a motion that the deep dive in the needs assessment process and the deep dive in the provider training capacity building process be moved to the April agenda as opposed to the March agenda.
Is there a second? Hearing no second, we'll just keep it fluid. Any other discussion on the first quarter? Moving on to the second quarter. Ms. Watson?
Absolutely. So, some of these date deadlines obviously are movable. The ethics training, once the full board is seated, you'll have to see when that occurs to actually choose which month is the most comprehensive. And then complete the needs assessment, and we'll talk a little bit about ways that the needs assessment can be approached in your community in the next section. But the largest part is review the needs assessment and report to the Board of County Commissioners on service needs, funding, and interagency coordination strategy. That really is your critical path. How do you take the results of your needs assessment, develop and do some mapping to service provider capacity, take that service provider capacity and then use it to dictate how much your millage that you're going to charge this first year for ad valorem is going to be, and then that leads to your trim notices where you have to do all of your public hearing and have that completed and then submitted by July 1. So that really is your critical path. as you're thinking about the things that need to be accomplished from meeting to meeting, is figuring out how you get to July 1 and what is the information that you need to really work through that trim process that is in that independent special handbooks district, independent special districts handbook. And then launch the provider training and capacity building workshop series. That can definitely be after you all have set your budget and determine where that capacity building needs to happen, and allow folks the time to figure out within their budgets how long it would take to onboard potentially new staff, how long it would take to help them work through the budget process and submit accompanying documents and metrics for which they would want to be measured with. Depending on the areas you fund, it could be that you have a service provider community that understands all of these things as part of their everyday work. And so the onboarding of those service providers might not need to be as long, or if you are funding a lot of different types of activities with many different service providers from many different communities, there is going to be a lot more thoughtful, integrated small group training that needs to happen so that everybody has equal and ample opportunity to apply for funds and provide services. Then you can launch your search for executive director, begin interviews. Those are one of the things that Alachua did once they had their 5 seated. And as you know, some of you have heard, Alachua County took 18 months to appoint their governor's appointees. Now, granted, it was during the first year of administration change from the governor. And so therefore there was a lot of appointments to be made when you have a new governor. We are really, really hopeful, and we will work in Tallahassee on your behalf to make sure that those appointments get appointed timely. But in Alachua County, they did move forward with an executive director search with all of the board member applicants being part of that process, along with the designated 5, just because they couldn't wait obviously too long to have an executive director, because money had to actually be spent and they wanted to make sure that they had it under a full-time executive director who's accountable for those funds. Draft personnel policies, HR process for board consideration. Those are things that can be done and are more of a movable timeline. However, I would caution, depending on what you set your ad valorem rate at, so whatever the mill, if you're going to go for the full half mill or a 0.25, whatever you decide, I would not want to leave all of that review process and administrative tasks to just an executive director. So thinking through, how do you work with getting support for that executive director, or creating some sort of community advisory committee made up of experts who are not applying for funding to review those proposals and capacity, so that there is uniform decision-making and scoring of those. And that moves into launching advisory committees as needed for many of those things. Hopefully by the 4th quarter, you'll have your executive director hired. Funds for the Escambia Children's Trust become available based on your successful trim process, and then you will start submitting quarterly reports to the Board of County Commissioners starting in fiscal year 2022, with an annual report due to January 1st, 2022. Within that first annual report, you will really just talk about the administrative things that occurred during that year, knowing that you will probably not get dollars on the street until December 2021. And then an independent audit plan for 2021 for accountability in accordance with the statute once you all have been put in place.
Okay. Questions? Got our work cut out for us. Yes.
Quick question. You mentioned the 18 months for Alachua. Were they able to do any of the processes based on availability of funding in their county, even though the full board wasn't set?
They were, Alachua was a little bit different in the fact that the county provided staff support until the executive director was hired. So I think it's just a different approach for the process. And like we stated at the last meeting, there are pros and cons to every approach that you have. I think the question becomes, how do you use your community resources to really help bring in the expertise needed to really help shape some of those processes, be part of the review committee, those that have written grants, scoring and rubrics. That becomes more of the volunteer position versus the county position, as long as the board, in essence, agrees to the scoring metrics and what needs to be put in place. And hopefully those things won't be a complete and initial need to develop and write from the very beginning. Like I said, we have 9 communities, some large, some small, that have come before you that have developed really thoughtful processes, have been in business for 30 years that hopefully you guys can beg, borrow, and steal from, and just really make sure that it's tailored to Escambia County, but yet you're looking across the landscape of what other communities have done before you.
Judge?
I do have some questions and comments, but I'm not sure they're necessarily for Michelle, and they may be more for Ms. Rogers. But,
Well, Ms. Rogers is not our attorney.
okay. I thought-
You're the only attorney here
Okay,
right
well, I'm
now.
not providing legal advice to the council that I'm a member of.
But
And
you
I
can ask
need-
your questions. I'm just,
Well, I'll just spitball then for the Escambia County to know, because
Okay.
again, I'm having a hard time reconciling between what the state, or quite frankly, we're discussing here we would like to have done quickly, and what is actually required of us to do quickly. And I think my big concern is, again, this balance of, just going back to the law, the ordinance says a board of 10, they voted to have 10 members. And if in fact we are required to act this year, and we cannot reconcile this part of the ordinance with this part of the ordinance, this part of the statute with this part of the statute, who wins? And what trumps what? And so, in semi-layman terms, that's what I'm really trying to figure out. is
well, and
the balance
we can have a discussion about legal services soon.
Okay, good. I think I missed
Okay.
something. I thought I read a summary of the
Commissioner May?
OCC meeting.
Did you have a question or?
Right, yeah,
comment?
and Honorable Judge, I'd love to hear from our attorney as we do this transition. How was Alachua staffed up? Was it the county staffed up, or was it an independent body? How did they staff up?
In my conversations with the chair from Alachua, and I'll let Ms. Watson answer it because she may know the answers.
Absolutely. So in Alachua County, the county provided staff support to the trust for its first full year of services. And so the county had a dedicated staff on that's whole purpose was to stand up the Children's Trust of Alachua County. Now, that is one way to absolutely move forward with creation. We had, and we surveyed, and I think you received that data at the last meeting, was we had a different level of experiences from different communities. So some got a line of credit from their county, some received no staff support. And I think what's really important is you have to understand the bandwidth of your community and what will actually move kind of the needle with the tasks moving forward. Not trying to understand what's happened in Escambia, but I know that the COVID and all the CARES Act funding, we've heard from our counties across the state that they're really, really trying to get those CARES Act dollars out, and that's taking a lot of staff time, as well as you all did have a natural disaster in Hurricane Sandy. And so that might minimize the ability of staff bandwidth to be able to help. What I think you all have to decide as a board is your biggest milestone that you all have to determine and meet as far as a benchmark is that July 1, 2021 trim notice. If you do not get to trim, you do not get money for another full year. So that'll be October 2022 infused into your community, and you have to decide and weigh and close the balance of community needs right now versus do you have the ability to wait for a full another year? And that's for you all to decide.
So, you know, we'll, if we get through this, then we can have that discussion about, I know from talking to the chair in Alachua, Alachua had some other things that was not a free service. The county, there was an interlocal agreement, so there were funds that were paid to the county. And also, they already had in place, their county commission had stood up an account for children's services prior because they had recognized in their county that there was a need and there was a budgeted item. So it was my understanding that they took that money that was in the county budget and gave that money to help the trust with some of their initial expenses as well.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Chairperson, and we have our administrator and our attorney here. I think that my colleagues, in a unanimous decision, offered any support that the county could give to this board, and I think that's the reason that our administrator and our attorney is here. In the previous meeting that was set, neither our administrator nor our attorney had any knowledge of anything that was going on at that point before the first meeting. And so they did come to the next meeting, and our staff has said, at the discretion of this board, the county will provide resources. I certainly, when we are in a position legally to provide a quorum, I certainly would go to my colleagues in terms of providing resources for the interim director or interim staff or startup costs. I would hope that I could depend on you and my colleagues from the school district to also help fund any initial operations as we go forward. I don't think that, if you can, I don't think that the county is going to be in a position that we're going to, well, I can't speak for the county. I don't think that I would bring forth for the county to take on the entire burden of providing funds for it. As you said, COVID, hurricane, Madam Administrator could speak to it, but we're probably going to have some budget shortfalls as we move forward. So I think that the commission certainly is supportive and would provide any resources that they can.
And I have a copy of the motion that you made at the Board of County Commissioners meeting related to that. When we get to that portion of the agenda, can have a discussion. And it's my understanding that depending on where we go in this meeting, we have secured a line of credit, so we won't need to get we haven't actually signed on the dotted line, but we understand that we can get it should we decide that we want to go that route.
So we've already secured a line of credit?
No, we have not. Nobody signed anything, but we have made some inquiries. Our registered agent made some inquiries to find out whether it would even be possible for us to do that. Since I watched the meeting where, it was discussed at the county commission, so we were coming up with a different approach, knowing that the county, plus, Janice Gilley, Allison, all of the people at the county, the commissioners, hurricane, COVID funds, CARES Act money. There is just so much on y'all's plate right now. We have a lot on our plates here at the school district too, but we've got 40,000 students, you've got the whole county to deal with. So, but if we can finish going over the timeline, and then we can get to the other parts of the discussion. So is there anything else? As we know, I think what we have established as a board about the timeline is we know it's going to need to be some fluidity to it. And we know that the most important part, from listening to Ms. Watson, is that trim notice that needs to get done. You know that at the county commission, we know that at the school board. So I think, you know, the other stuff we can, as we figure out where we are, what needs to get done in order for that to happen in the timely manner. Does that agree? That we've discussed, that's basically where we are at this point? Okay. So, at least you have now in front of you all of the things that are suggested that we get done. We can discuss as we move along what we get done, when we get it done. But now you have in front of you 2 pages that show you which items need to be taken care of as we move forward with the organization of the trust. So if we're ready to move on, I asked Ms. Watson, when I had a long conversation with her this week, to kind of walk us through the needs assessment piece, because I know we've had some discussion last month about there are a lot of needs assessments of various kinds that have been done in our community. And so she has some things that will maybe help us with that process as well. So, Ms. Watson?
Absolutely. So, you know, the needs assessment that's required in Florida statute does not require to be a brand new needs assessment conducted only by the Children's Trust through an RFP. You all may get to the point after a year or two where you want to have a more formal needs assessment done. But for the sake of meeting that trim timeline, the needs assessment really drives the budget and the millage rate that you are going to potentially look at for year 1 of funding. We also know that depending on how old the data is of your last needs assessment that have probably been conducted by quite a few entities in your community can be aggregated is, has there been any new data collected from the time of COVID? So I don't know in your community if folks were collecting COVID impact data, if putting that data next to historical needs would change that need at all. I think one of the things that would be really important for a needs assessment, especially, I would suggest this with any needs assessment, but with a needs assessment, especially in the time of COVID, is seeing and really identifying through focus groups or survey protocols what families and community members are seeing as some short-term needs. What do they need immediately for support, and then what are those long-term needs? And the reason why you might want to look at that with some duality is that if you can really work and use some dollars to triage some of those short-term needs, right? So I'm going to use food insecurity as an item for discussion, right? If food insecurity is a short-term need and you know that you can infuse a lot of dollars, help some families that might be having food insecurity as a result of COVID and job loss, you know that will eventually, when the economy begins to recover and rebound, that need won't be as great. And then you can really focus on some of those other long-term issues. So thinking of Maslow's hierarchy, you know, basic needs, what needs to happen, when what needs to be put in place, you can start identifying some short-term needs in areas and some long-term needs. Through that, then you can do some mapping around service provider capacity. So beginning with food insecurity again, do you all have the service provider capacity to provide food services to the level needed to meet the community? If you don't, one of the things that you need to think through is, you know, you can't turn on November 1, you're getting dollars and expect them to have ready staff, ready infrastructure, ready delivery mechanisms and food pipelines to come in, is that's going to take time. So usually what CSCs prior have done is they actually fund on what they call a 3/4 year, the first year, in some instances where they know that it's going to take an entity a full quarter just to hire new staff, just to be able to begin with the infrastructure, training, and processes to move forward. So one of the things that I would look at is not only what were the needs before, what are the COVID specific needs that might be short-term and long-term. You might see that the short-term needs and long-term needs were always the same. COVID didn't have an impact on it other than maybe exacerbate it. And then from there on, what is that infrastructure that's needed to support services in your community? Where you don't have infrastructure, you're going to have to build it. If you have to build it from the ground up, that is going to take time and significant time. And so that might not be one of your first tier priorities. Year one is funding a item or an issue or a need that doesn't have true infrastructure in place already. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink of water. Sorry. And so moving forward is then thinking through what is the millage that's appropriate. If you all go for your full half mill and attempt to put every dollar on the street, you raise a large flag of reverting money potentially, which you don't necessarily want to do. But two is if it's all expended, is what happens when you are at full capacity and you move forward. And so those are the items in the issues that you're going to have to weigh as a board is what are our ability, what is the millage rate? Do we want to go the full half mill? Do we have a spending plan that will make sure that if we do the full half mill that we're not going to be overspent in years to come versus being underspent? It is a delicate balance, and it's really based on the needs assessment, the provider capacity, and then building your budget for how that can be scaled to move forward.
Questions, comments? Dr. Smith?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Ms. Watson, a question on the time frame. Just for clarity's sake, the needs assessment is separate from establishing from TRIM as far as a deadline. So the needs assessment might be formalized after that process, and that's statutorily, that's okay. Am I correct?
Statutorily, that's okay. Your needs assessment should drive your budget. So
Yeah.
even if it's formally not adopted, your budget needs to be adopted beforehand because it should drive your budget in your need in your service community. So it's not statutorily required independent on one another, but it's really important to inform the budget.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Commissioner May?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. What would be your recommendation, Ms. Watson, after we levy the tax, if there are unmet needs? I mean, have other councils provided the injection of resources for the unmet needs?
Absolutely. I think that is a fabulous question. And so one of it really stems from your provider capacity, right? How do you build that? So as your new service providers are providing services and, making sure that they're meeting their outcomes and their metrics and identifying new families or children to serve, that whole next year, what you want to have is your infrastructure in place through your program services officer, your CFO. What they're doing is they're looking at, okay, how do we build capacity this whole next year so that if we went this first year at, let's just say 0.25 mil, and next year we want to go to 0.4 mil, right? Getting closer to that half mil, which is the ultimate goal, that you're building that capacity year after year to be able to expand services and expand the number of programs that you have in the communities.
So will we seek private funding, or will we try to expand our millage and increase our tax base, or will we seek other grants or other philanthropy funding?
I think you need to look at the opportunities, right? I'm not one to shut down an opportunity if one comes across that would absolutely help leverage dollars through a grant opportunity. I think that any of those decisions would need to be made through the thoughtfulness of what is the bandwidth, right? What's the current bandwidth? Let's do our statutorily responsible requirements first. Let's make sure that those dollars are being spent and that those providers are receiving all the technical assistance they need to be productive and provide outcome measures that will inform your annual report moving forward. So it really, really depends on the infrastructure you put in place and the staff you put in place to be able to balance all of those items. But I would say no matter what, private funding, grant funding, it's really important that the trust do its statutorily required work first and foremost.
What have you seen in the successful models across the state and other children trust funds?
Really, I would say that the first 5 years, really focusing on setting up the administration and the infrastructure of the children's services, of the Children's Trust, and then really making sure that you all are looking at collective impact, long-term investments that over time you're going to be able to look and see the results of those outcomes, right? Not outputs. The first year might be outputs. How many children served? How many meals were delivered to families? Those types of things, but the long-term collective impact on, has food insecurity gone down in your community? Has the number of children who've been able to access high quality early learning gone up? Whatever you focus on needs to make sure that it is done along with the administration. And then through those innovative practices and development of a comprehensive system of services, you actually become more appealing to grant funders because you have the infrastructure in place and are able to draw down philanthropy dollars in a way that you might not have had before.
So the first 5 years, we're really focused a lot on administration and infrastructure.
Yep, building the service provider capacity.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Where, and people sitting up here probably know the answer to this, but where do we find out all the needs assessments that we actually have already had done? You know, I know Commissioner May said he thought there were some already done, and I know Achieve Escambia has done some, but I mean.
Point of clarification, I didn't necessarily say in terms of this. I said there have been a lot of needs assessments in the community, from Ruby Payne, Bridges to Poverty, Community Impact,
Okay.
Achieve Escambia. We just had a community impact Quint Suter just did. So I said there are a lot of studies out there.
Okay.
So I don't know if as it relates to what we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
But there's been a lot of studies.
Yeah, I thought you maybe knew of some, so that's why I was asking you.
A lot of studies. We've had a lot of studies in this. We have boatloads of them.
And so that, you know, so how do we, as a board, know where to access those needs assessments to know whether we have gaps, whether we need additional data?
Madam Chair, I think that's a
Is that a question
key
you-
role of our interim executive director.
Okay,
They can go out there and do some serious staff work and find that and bring it to the board and present some of the early results of
Good.
what's been done in the past. I mean, we all got this book last time, Achieving
Yeah.
It. It's got some great statistics in it, but, you know, how current it is, how COVID-related it is.
are there new issues that have
yeah.
come up? Yeah,
But there's some pretty easy to grab stuff right out of here.
good, okay.
Absolutely. And Madam Chair, let me add, I hate to be the squeaky wheel on the wagon, but we certainly have to hear from the people. And I think that that's our interim director, but I think that, part of the statute obviously tells us to identify and assess the needs of the children in the community. And as you set your board, that's part of the board, to go to the community to figure out what they need. And so
What-
when you have public hearings and dial sessions and those type of things, I think that it's not for the community to come to us.
No,
It's
we have to go to
because
them.
It's for us to go to the community and to listen to the community with our interim director and with us as a board to go into what was, quite frankly, the community that was advertised in which to pass this tax and to hear what they need. And so, I'm excited about us going into housing projects in underserved neighborhoods and listening to what citizens want. And so, as we set our board, I think that that's important. I mean, we can all do studies and think that we know exactly what people need, but we don't know until we go as a board and listen. So that's why I'm excited about the next 8 months, to go listen to the citizens to know exactly what they want. I mean, it's kind of what they do in Parent University. I mean, what do the parents want? It's not what I want for them. It's what do they want for themselves.
And when Ms. Watson and I were talking earlier, she was talking about those opportunities for focus groups in the communities themselves to hear from the people, what they need. You want to elaborate on that?
Absolutely. As part of that needs assessment one pager that's in your package, you'll see absolutely how do you conduct focus groups? How do you have community town halls to really understand? How do you do parent interviews? How do you do service provider interviews? What is it going to take for you to expand your services? Where are your gaps? Do you have a ready staff pool, right? Do you have enough people in the area that need support? Do you have that ready pool of employees that you can onboard? And so it's really, really important that as part of, numbers are numbers and data is data, that you have to understand the narrative around the why and the how in order to get to really, really thoughtful investments to really help with the problem, right? We know that in this Gambia there might be food insecurity, but what is the reason? Why is that happening? Are there food deserts? Is there a pipeline distribution? Is there not enough grocery stores? All stuff that you don't know until you go into the community and determine, wow, it's really a transportation issue, not necessarily an access issue. Those are the types of things you all need to get really granular on, so that as you're making those investments, you're understanding some of that root cause data, so that you can be really thoughtful in deploying many different interventions that speak to those root causes.
Ms. Watson, I can't agree. I mean, so often we talk about diversity and inclusion. Diversity is you bring a diverse group of people to the table. Inclusion means you include people in the decision making for their destiny. And so I certainly agree with my colleagues all to the left of me that's what we have the opportunity to do. I mean, when you develop, you have pre-development. When you build a building, you have architectural designs. And so this is our opportunity to design a project for human investment, human capital, that allows for us to take our time and chart out a course of success for people with their opinion, and not just bureaucrats or administration sitting there saying, I know what's good for you. Because quite frankly, I don't think we do. We have an idea, but we hadn't lived that life.
And we also have to measure what we do so that we see that what we're doing is making a difference. We'll have to have, measurable goals and
put our goals and objectives, and how do we measure them, and then hold ourselves accountable, and hold organizations that we fund accountable.
That's right.
Madam Chairman, I
Yes.
just add a point. I think our needs assessment is going to be vitally important, because I think there will be many ideas and many projects in which to invest. And so defining, back to what Ms. Watson, you were speaking about, those core fundamental points that our community raises, it really speaks to the importance of that needs assessment, I believe.
Absolutely.
Any other comments about the needs assessment? Do you have anything else to share, Ms. Watson?
Nope, but I'll stay on if you have any questions as you move forward.
Thank you. Okay. I know that our next discussion is on our bylaws. And my hope is that we can go through the bylaws. What I'd like to do is take it section or article by article. We can make adjustments, amend it, debate whether we want to amend each section. When we're finished with each section, we move to the next, so that by the time we're at the end, we have made all the amendments that we want to what's here, and we vote on it as a complete document. Judge?
Yes. I had requested that And again, as a reminder, we opted to skip the sunshine law presentation because everyone acted like they understood sunshine.
Yep.
But I wanted to include my revisions in the agenda so that the public could see what I had an issue with and follow along, and was told that I should not, that they would not be included in the agenda and to bring them here tonight. So I
And-
guess I
and-
just need some clarification on what can be attached to an agenda and what not, because even quite frankly, an agenda is a communication at its core. But I wasn't looking for a response. I just thought this meeting would go a lot faster and the public would be more informed about what we were talking about if my questions and comments and critiques
And-
were included.
And I apologize.
Okay, so that's not gonna be an issue moving forward then?
No,
Okay, all right.
what needs to happen, and I talked to someone who suggested that maybe it shouldn't be that I take what you have and we put it all together. We could have put it on separately, and that's what I should have done, and I apologize to you for
Okay,
that.
all right, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure I was not missing something. Thank you. All right.
We just need to, you know, if we had clerical staff, it might have been easier. All right, so at the table, I gave
Madam
you a
Chairperson?
copy of,
Madam Chairman, before you go into the bylaws, I certainly want to go through them and certainly have input. After, much conversation with our council today, I would just like to make sure that we are legally able to vote on bylaws and that we do have a quorum. And so I still have a lot of reservations about voting on, whether they be bylaws or rules or ordinances. I mean, it's not necessarily a 501c3, as council has said, so we can have bylaws, rules. I'm not going to get caught into that. I just don't know if I'm going to be comfortable enough. I'm very comfortable going through them. I just don't know if I'm going to be comfortable enough to vote on those, on bylaws with the conversation that I've had with Tallahassee and the conversation that I've had with our council. But I'm certainly open to go through the bylaws.
I guess before we go through the exercise of, I will tell you why I feel it's important for us to have bylaws done, is because as the chair, I have no direction on what to do. You have no direction as a board on how many meetings to attend, what is a quorum when we're here. There are things that bylaws accomplish to put us moving forward in our work. There are 5 appointees to the board at this point. A quorum is half, 3 out of 5. It would be what was in here. And I know where you're reading in the statute, and, if Ms. Rogers wants to come up and comment on, because Alachua operated with their 5, and they even hired their executive director with their 5. So,
Okay, but I guess, Madam Chairman, I guess my question is, I keep hearing Alachua did this. I haven't actually heard any legal authority.
Okay.
I mean, maybe it was that they never raised the issue.
well, I've had a conversation with Ms. Rogers. I don't know that she feels comfortable because she is not our attorney. The attorney in Alachua was the one that told their group that they could constitute as the 5. I could not, I was going to ask another attorney that had been doing some volunteer work with with the referendum, but I could not do that. So I don't know whether Ms. Rogers feels comfortable coming up and telling us what she found out, and then would that help your
Yes, I mean, again, I think I'm admittingly, if that question is directed at me, I think I misunderstood what happened at the board meeting last week, and I kind of thought I was already looking to her, apparently.
No,
My mistake.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
I mean-
what happened at the board meeting, and she can speak for herself, of course, but I watched the meeting, and what the thing
I think
says
I'm
these
clear
were.
now. I think I'm clear now.
Okay, we have to request,
Right.
then the Board of County Commission has to vote
I see.
to provide.
So, I mean, again, there are many attorneys in our community, this seemingly should be a question that we can get an answer on, or at least get some legal opinion so that we can make a decision on it. but I mean, I agree with the reservations. I kind of feel like we've been putting the cart before the horse. Because we don't have a budget, so we can't hire staff, we don't have a line of credit, so we can't hire, and yet we're already talking about, things that we can't do until we have those things. So
Well, I
admittingly,
think
I'm
if
a
we-
little confused.
If we get the bylaws passed, then we can move forward on the other things.
Well, I mean, I think that, Madam Council, I mean, it is a transition, and, the county attorney reports to the 5 people, and she can clarify that, Madam Chairperson. I think that the board voted to allow for staff to assist as less or as much as this board wants them to assist. And so I think that, the question would be, is there any help that this board needs in the transition? And I think Madam Council would be willing to do that. I certainly recognize this is an independent board, and we will hire our own staff and have our own legal staff. But throughout the transition, I think that there's a precedent that there has been an opportunity to transition from the county helping to get this board, and in no way do we want the county operating this. I think they have enough work to do, and we know that this needs to be an independent board outside of the county. And so I'm good. If we're comfortable, if you're comfortable with it, Madam Chair, I mean, I'm good. I mean, we've had some conversations today, but I do believe that there has been at least 3 to 5 Attorney General reports that constitutes what a quorum is. And I'm good with moving forward. I just am not good with moving forward and making decisions that can be recalled. And so if you feel comfortable that we can move forward without these things being recalled and we have a legal opinion, you'll find my support. But I would like for somebody who has a law degree, who has been
Besides the
sanctioned.
judge?
Besides, the judge, I respect her degree as well. I would have someone else to say that to me.
Okay.
And certainly I believe we need bylaws and we need all of those things, and I'm going to, yeah. I would not want bylaws or rules or regulations or even meeting times set for a board when I'm coming into a board. And so that would be my opinion, but I'm, going to be supportive of whatever we get the opinion from the attorney and from you.
Okay. Other board members? What's Leon County doing?
For the record, I do not know.
Okay.
I called them the Tuesday after our last meeting, and I got the null response. I think a whole lot of nothing right now. They definitely got their names in, but other than that, I don't think there's been much progress. I did note, however, Madam Chair, that at the end of the bylaws, there is an amendment authority that any member of the trust can offer an amendment with a 2/3 vote. So I feel safe in that anything we agree to tonight can be modified by any board member in the future. So I'm very comfortable with proceeding.
Thank you. And I was going to make that point as well, is that, if we can use these to work until we get the components, and if there's anything that needs to be changed at that point, it's not in the bylaws where we meet, it's not in the bylaws when we meet, because there will be a time that we have to create policy to go along with these. Like, for instance, we'll get through them. So
Well, and I'm open, Madam Chairman, I'm very open, and quite frankly, it doesn't really matter what Alachua does or what Leon does.
I know,
It
but-
matters what the Attorney General opinion is, and I think.
did you find one? Because I couldn't find one.
I think Madam Council has multiple ones, yeah, so they have multiple opinions of dating from 1977 to 2010, what
Judge.
constitutes a quorum.
Judge, I was going to say, would it be
Yeah, the judge is much
inappropriate-
better at this than me.
I was going to ask the judge if it would be inappropriate for Ms. Rogers to come forward, since she can't give us she's not. Mike.
I don't think it's inappropriate if that's the question.
Okay.
But I don't know what authority we have to require her to either, I guess.
She can come as a citizen.
Ms. Rogers, would you mind? If you do, just say no, because you don't work for me. Exactly. I am a citizen. I am a citizen, so in a way you do work for me. But. So do you have anything that would enlighten us on this issue?
It's certainly a little awkward. I obviously do work for the Board of County Commissioners, and they did vote unanimously, as Commissioner May has pointed out, to allow us to offer to you all our services. You are a separate legal entity, and therefore you do have the authority as the board as a whole to determine who you wish to use for these services. In anticipation of tonight, because I wasn't sure exactly how things were going to play out this evening, I did poke around with this issue a little bit. I was aware of the issue with Alachua County. I think they went through, I don't want to speak for the Alachua County Attorney's Office, but it sounds like they kind of had to go through some contortions because of the situation they were faced with. And I think actually their opinion was not so much that 5 was a quorum, but more that 5 was the board, because they were de facto cut short. And that's a little bit different, because then you're dealing with a committee of 5 versus 5 as a quorum in lieu of 6. So that's a little bit of a very unique situation. It's not necessarily the same fact pattern that this board may end up facing. I think that was based in part on the gubernatorial challenges that were presented. It could have been due to some other factors as well, and I don't want to speak for them. My personal opinion, not necessarily serving as the counsel to you all, but my personal opinion that I reached was that, respectfully, maybe getting a little ahead of yourselves. That's just my personal opinion. It looks like there are 3 things in my mind that make me think you need at least 6 members to be conducting business. One is the way that the Florida Constitution defines a vacancy in office. And I think that the 5 seats that aren't filled are going to be considered a vacancy in office at this point and not non-existent seats. So to me, that's one of the factors. The other is, as Commissioner May has referenced, there are a handful of AGOs. They are not specific to this fact pattern, so they're not necessarily directly on point, but they do talk about a quorum. And most definitions of quorum do anticipate it as a majority of seats. I didn't see any that talked about it as being half of the seats. So that's a little bit concern. And then the statute itself that sets up the Children's Services Trust talks about all the things that you all have to do as you're talking and working through. And they all talk about doing those things immediately after appointment of the members, not of some of the members, not of a functioning group of members, not of half the members, not of the de facto members. It says the members. And so to me, if you put all 3 of those factors together, maybe a better idea might be to wait and see what the governor does or how quickly the governor does it. I realize very much the anxiety of the issue with the trim deadlines, and so it's a real issue to deal with, because if it takes a little while, then what do you do about the trim deadlines? So I understand that that's a challenge. Is the board, as the Children's Services Trust, in a position to be willing to wait until 2022 for collections? And that's beyond, I'm not the counsel to the board at this point, but that is clearly that's what all these challenges are presented by, as the deadlines for the trim, for the collection of the tax.
Do you know of any citizen in Alachua County that broached the subject that they were not, in fact, able to do what they did by operating as 5?
No, and they clearly were able to do it, and I understand that that's, I suspect as an independent special district, there's a significant amount of deference given to the authority of the board.
Okay.
I do not know of any specific challenges to them. I'm also not personally aware of what the Leon County Board has done since.
Right.
I do know that they had their process underway for purposes of getting their citizen appointees. And in fact, I think that some of those materials were used early on in the formation of our application, or at least our recommendation to our board. So I was aware that they were very much underway with that, but I haven't had an opportunity to double back with Leon County to see what they've done.
Okay. Ms. Watson, are you still there? She said she was going to hang out.
Yes, I'm here.
Can you shed any light on the 5 of us operating as opposed to waiting for the 10?
I am not a lawyer. So I think you all have to look at, I am aware of Alachua's opinion. Alachua's opinion was due in part, and they were a little bit different than you. So I do want to be clear that when they came with their opinion, it was because they had already submitted their applications to the governor's office, and the governor had failed to act within the 45 days. So please know that they were just in a different spot for what their opinion stated. And so their opinion stated, because the governor lacked to make an appointment within his legally designated timeline, that therefore the board was constituted and could move forward. But like I said, Alachua asked for that was the opinion by their county attorney at a very different time than where you are now in your process. So I can tell you that that was the most recent. As far as the other CSCs, I hate to say this, but I was not in my role when they were created over 14 years ago. So that is all the information I have to give you right now.
I appreciate that, because that was very, very informative to me, that they waited and they let the names go in, and then when they were not here in the 45 days, that was when they took the action to move forward. Is that what I understood you to say?
Yes, that is when they sought a legal opinion of what do we do now, because the timeline had passed. It doesn't mean that was just when they asked the question. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't have had an opinion had they asked before the 45 days, but that was the trigger that had them ask for a legal opinion in Alachua County, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense to me. I mean, you know, that kind of addresses some of the concerns you have, doesn't it not, Judge?
I don't want to get too far down the road, but admittingly, you know, I am here because I quite literally right now am the only juvenile judge in Escambia County. And so I think I come at this a little differently than you all do. But again, my fidelity is to the law, and I just want to make sure that any vote that I'm asked to vote on, or that I do vote on, is a legal one. And Ms. Rogers, in your personal capacity or your professional capacity, I will sleep better tonight having heard that some of my concerns are validated. So thank you very much.
So what is your desire for this evening then?
Well, I mean, I think there are some things on this agenda that we can talk about, and I agree we can go ahead and clean up the bylaws to the extent that, you know, there are some issues that I think our future members will appreciate. But I agree that any major decisions, and again, it's probably a discussion about what a major decision is, but I think at least Commissioner May believes that bylaws are a major decision. And so, I mean, I think there are some things we need to talk about for sure, but I would agree that major decisions are not something that we have a quorum to vote on. That would be my opinion. And again, I could be outvoted if everybody else, I guess. You know, you don't really need my vote if you've decided you're a quorum, I guess.
Well, no, I mean, it would be 3 of the 5 would have to be vote affirmatively.
Correct.
So,
That's my point.
yeah.
You could do this without me.
Well,
Madam Chair,
yes.
if I may, just going to throw out a suggestion. Would it be possible that we take this document of the draft bylaws and go through them to establish temporary guidelines that will, certain sections that we need to have, such as meetings and so forth, are established simply as temporary guidelines. Then when our full board comes on, we could use those or not, but at least they will give us some functionality in the meantime. Just a thought, suggestion.
Thank you. What do you, the other suggestion, I mean, we can go through it now, or we can postpone it until next month, where you can put your suggestions out in the agenda next month, if you would rather do that, Judge. But I will say that having worked without structure as the chair this last month has been a challenge. You know,
Madam Chair, and I
Yes.
hate to interrupt you, but I do want, I mean, I feel the need to just commend you on that, because, I mean, there was a reason I kind of jumped down when we had this vice chair conversation. So, I mean, I do appreciate it. This has been a lot of work on you.
so do we want to take some time and just go through and talk about them, and then at least agree that these would be a guideline as we move forward until and then if we have to, after 45 days after they've sent in, we still are not sitting with the remaining members, then we can discuss it again as to what action we want to take, correct? Agreed with everybody?
Madam Chairman, I agree, and thank you for your leadership you've gone, and absolutely, I think that we can get some recommended structure without making any vote to look to your leadership for that.
The only issue that might arise is if, when we get to the point where we're talking about needing a line of credit, that was an issue that it might be necessary that we have bylaws. So I might have to come back and talk about that in a minute, but, okay.
And that's fine, and I appreciate the leadership, and certainly, you know, I'm going to be supportive of getting, you know, our temporary staffing in place, you know, at some point to move forward. I'm very supportive
Okay.
of that. I don't know if the line of credit is the only option. I would expect that the recommendation would give me alternatives of funding sources of where we go. And it may not be a line of credit. And it may be philanthropy, it may be donations, it may be us going back to the county. As you've just said, the school board can't do it. I mean, if you can't do it statutorily, it may be the city, it may be the county, it may be our partners. It would be difficult for me as a board to vote for a line of credit that ultimately resides in the responsibility of all who sit on this board and not just 5 people. And so I'm open to that recommendation, Madam Chairperson, but I certainly don't think that I'm going to be supportive. Not tonight. I mean, and maybe, you know, in 30 days or 45 days, after looking over it and seeing what it costs. I mean, one of the things, I mean, the interest rates and utilizing and dollars and paying it back. I mean, that probably would be a further discussion for me if we could, you know, get the money without having to go to the bank. Maybe we can. I mean, maybe that's the best option. And if that's the best option, I'm certainly going to be supportive. But I'd like to look at any option that we can possibly do.
Okay, before we go into the bylaws discussion, if y'all wouldn't mind, I'd like to have the discussion about the interim executive director then, because if we're not going to do bylaws, I'll just be blunt, it would be nice to have somebody that was doing the stuff that needs to get done in order for us to do the trim notice.
I mean, how do we are you talking about advertising for an interim director, or are you talking about suggesting one that we vote on tonight?
Well, last month, we discussed that the agent representative has in other areas other trust has worked as their interim. And, you know, and Mr. Ritchie's name came up last month, but we did not at that meeting go there. So I'm just wondering if we could do that. But then we have to go into the budget and we have to discuss payment. And then I heard, when I saw the motion that the county put together, I'm not sure how they would designate somebody to be our executive director.
Well, that's clearly a misunderstanding of the motion, that the county made a motion because I made it. There was in no way and any intention to have a interim or a temporary executive director. It was simply to provide any support that the county could, not to run the operation.
Okay, because here it says, using county resources and assets to assist, authorize county administrator to offer county resources, but not limited, like the building, like, thank you for letting us be here.
Right.
Authorize the county attorney to offer legal services and legal counsel. So it doesn't say that. So
Right,
that's-
exactly, absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
And
That's
so-
what, that was the point,
Yeah,
Madam
but-
Chairperson, to provide any assistance that's needed, not to run the operation. So
Well-
that was never an intention, I believe, by our motion, to have any of the county operate this. It was just to provide a building, if there was any legal questions on Sunshine as we got set up. So that's quite
well-
frankly a misinterpretation
No,
of the motion.
I misheard you when you spoke a while ago.
Yeah, well, that's, you just read it, so, I
Okay.
mean, and that I didn't get out of it, that we wanted to have an interim director, have any of our staff be provided. I can assure you that our administrator and attorney has much more than they can possibly do, so, no.
I was thinking the same thing. So, if we were as a board to decide that we would like to request of the Board of County Commissioners to allow us to use your legal counsel for issues, we would then, in my mind, still need to have someone working through this 250 pages of opportunity, unless somebody here wants to do that with me.
I think I'm still, I mean, and again, I saw this on the agenda, I'm sorry. Bless you. Thank you. But I guess the question is, one,
Be sure to get up there so I can hear you. Thank you. I know you're used to being
No, I
able to
know.
be heard
Everyone-
everywhere.
no, it's okay. The question becomes, I guess, one, are we talking about paying the interim director? Because if we're talking about paying the interim director, then again, I think we're talking about making major decisions without a quorum. And I think the second issue we need to discuss is, again, this kind of came up at what I think is obviously at the last minute at our last meeting, but has, again, I think we need to have a discussion about whether it was advertised, that if anybody wants to be the interim director, I think that has to be a discussion that we at least have and either decide whether or not we want that to be. So I guess when we talk about interim, are we talking about interim between now and 45 days from now when potentially we have a full board? Or if you're talking about until an executive gets hired, and I don't have any of those answers. Those are
And that would be at the pleasure of the board. When I said interim, I was thinking until we get another one. That was my thought. However long that takes, because I do know from talking to people in Alachua County, they did go ahead with their decision on that executive director with just the 5 of them because it was taking so long. Hopefully it won't take us that long to get there. Okay, it is 7:30. And I know that it's supposed to be just 2 hours. So I need to know, do we want to go through the bylaws and get them as guidelines? Or do we want to postpone till next month when we might be closer to knowing whether we're going to have let's see, it won't be 45 days, depending on where we meet next month. If we meet late in the month, it still won't be 45 days. It'd have to be the middle of April before we hit the 45 days, right? Thank you.
Yeah, I know. It's,
So what were you saying?
no, I mean, whatever you want to do, Madam Chairperson, it's fine with me.
Again, I hate, Madam Chairman, that I keep talking, but I think what I'm hearing from you is that the most immediate thing we really need to talk about is some urgent issues, which include money, assistance, and maybe that takes precedence in our next 30 minutes over the bylaws.
Yeah, if we're going to, I put my name out to be the chair because I know I'm probably the least busy of all of you up here. But again, I'm learning this as I go as well as you do.
And Patty,
So-
let me just say for the record, Buzz Ritchie is a mentor of mine, and so I'm going to be very supportive of Buzz. I think we need to identify, I mean, I think that, you know, and Buzz is a dear friend. So I would say this to him if I was on the phone, if he was out. You got to set a budget first. We got to see what the correct compensation is and what support staff and how much money we do need. And I know you have some of that in the minutes. But for me, set the budget. And we're not going to set it tonight, like you said, within 30 minutes. I think the number one thing is to temporarily, and the reason I asked for the county to be of assistance in this transition period, because I didn't think we had the statutory authority to do anything. I mean, when you started making loans from a bank, all the board members signed for it. I mean, and so by statute, if we took the statute to the bank to open up a bank account, they would say you have 10 members and not 5 members. I mean, we all have said on nonprofit. So I think that there are some challenges that we need some transition to the point where we do have money to make that happen. And I'm not necessarily sure that the bank is where we get that money from. Maybe it is, and that's fine. But I don't want to make a decision without knowing exactly where we have the funding for. I mean, what we're talking about, when we can stay here for another 45 minutes or 2 hours, the bottom line is, where do we get the money from to staff up? And that's the bottom line. And so how do we identify the funding sources to be able to hire somebody?
And I serve on a 5-member board, so I know how many people it takes to move things. And I'm hearing that there are at least 2 people that are concerned that we are not legally constituted to move forward, to get a loan, to have bylaws. So I need to know what the others are thinking.
This is Walter. I am also equally concerned that the entire board is not represented and could not commit the rest of the board to something of a financial obligation. So that would greatly concern me that we would not be able to move forward with line of credit until all 10 are present, unless we're in some exceptional circumstance, which would be after the 45 days and having something upon us that we can't control. But again, I think there's a real fundamental decision here that if we can't seat the entire board, we're looking at 22. We're not looking at 21. And I think that's just a matter of fact. I'd like to move forward, but I think it's more pertinent to have the entire board seated to do it correctly.
Dr. Smith? I've counted 3 just then.
Well, Patty, I mean, in all fairness, and I respect what you're saying, what you've heard, what 2 people have said. It's not what 2 people have said. It's a recommendation of the attorney that represents Escambia County. So it's not my opinion. I mean,
I know, but she doesn't get to vote. Y'all do.
But she gets to give her opinion. I mean, she can keep us out of prison.
Dr. Smith?
Well, given I think the situation where it looks like there's this concern about the legality of us moving forward, I'm wondering if we need to, my worry is we need to be able to hit that July 1st timeline with trim. To me, that is the biggest ticket on our to-do list. I think the other thing, too, is the needs assessment. I think that's pressing. And for us to function well, we're certainly going to need structure. I'm wondering if we do make this change, do we need to restructure our meetings? And once we get additional board members and we get the full slate, if we need to double up in a month or two to conduct the work. Because I am worried about the timeline. I think the one thing we owe to our citizens is to make sure we have that July 1st deadline met.
So can I get at least a motion to ask the Board of County Commissioners to give us legal counsel and the assistance that was stated, and but I mean, I'm thinking, can we even do that? If your issue is that we can't do any of the other things, can we do that?
Madam Chairs, just for discussion purposes, I do think it's acceptable to ask the county for that support from an attorney and from support staff. There is a lot of lifting that can be done with that effort. I know that you could use the support. And so I think that would be something very fair to ask for, and I think it would give you an attorney to talk to when legal issues came up. I don't know how much of an agenda we can set for March. That's a concern of mine. I think we can probably have a fairly robust agenda for April, understanding that that's over 45 days from now, and we might actually have the full board in play. But I'm very happy that Dr. Smith recommended an accelerated time for future meetings. I think post-April, we might go bi-weekly or something to get a lot more done at a better pace.
I agree,
Yeah.
because there are going to be things that we're going to need to do. I was already going to ask for some work sessions of more than 2 hours. We're going to have half-day type things where we're going to put together policies and key budgeting and those kind of things. So if we could have a motion that we ask the Board of County Commissions for their assistance, and then when we get that approved, I would like to ask the county attorney to provide a written legal opinion on when we are able to work as a group, as a constituted body. So that we put that in.
Madam Chairman, I'm very supportive of, and I think the board has voted, and I'm very supportive of.
Which board?
The Board of County Commissioners, they voted in
to provide
favor,
a-
but they asked about how much we were going to pay them.
Well, I mean, I think the answer to them is nothing, that we're not going to pay them anything. But certainly, I don't know how we would, call for a motion and second and vote for the attorney then to give us an opinion on whether or not we have the authority to make a vote. I'm very supportive of you engaging as chair, and I think that you've had, multiple conversations, and you've worked tirelessly with the administrator and the attorney to move forward. I mean, I'm supportive of you moving forward. I'm not supportive of me, making a vote for the minutes to ask her an opinion of whether or not I can vote.
Well, I'm going to ask Ms. Rogers to come back up, because when I watched the meeting, I thought she was very clear in the process. The Board of County Commissioners voted affirmatively to provide these services that were listed in the motion to our board. I thought I heard her very clearly say we would have to make the request of the Board of County Commissioners as an actionable item for the board to vote on, the Board of County Commissioners. Ms. Rogers, would you come up and see if I remembered what you said properly? Because I am certainly probably not good at that. And then if that is in fact true, tell us how we make that motion.
In my opinion, there is a pool of resources available for Madam Chairperson or for support people who have supported this throughout the vote and referendum process to help get it launched as soon as you have your 10 members. So I would suggest that we're here, the Board of County Commissioners has authorized both of us and our staffs to provide assistance, and if that's to you, I think that we can absolutely do that. We have the support from our board to be able to offer that. If that is to the support personnel who helped get this put into place through the referendum, we can help them as well to help launch you as soon as you have your 10 members. That's what I would recommend.
Okay, so there's not an action that would be necessary, in your opinion?
Back to my opinion, which is that you don't have a quorum.
I know. So how do we ask, so you're saying that we have the assistance of the county without asking?
Well, at this point, you've got a pool of resources to tap into, whether that be to you or whether that be to the support personnel who are trying to move this along. The effort is already underway through the administrator to get those names into the governor ASAP. So my advice would be to adjourn.
Madam Chair?
That's my advice.
Where'd that
Might
come
I
from?
ask, would that include potentially advertising the interim executive director's description for potential recruiting for that position?
Well, I think that as far as financially, I would think that our board would be supportive of that. My concern is that your group of 10 may want to have some say into what that looks like.
Dr. Smith?
So, and I'm going to go just back for a point of clarification. Based on how the trust was set up and organized, and then based upon what you've kindly shared with us, your interpretation, we really shouldn't be meeting until all 10. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what I heard
That's
her
my
say.
opinion.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
I think the only point that I'm going to add is that I'm going to make sure that I do what I need to do in this capacity. But what I just want to point out, though, is that, I mean, we're kind of borrowing trouble in that we have no idea what the governor's going to do. He doesn't even have our list yet. But what I would like to make, because I've heard this kind of, at Latchwood did this because 45 days, but I want to make sure that I'm prepared if we don't have our 10 people. I don't necessarily, because the Latchwood did it, that gave them the legal authority to do it. And I appreciate it's like an appeal. If nobody files an appeal, then, you know, it is what it is. But I'm just going to make sure that I know what it says beyond that point, so that at least next time we meet one way or another, we should have some clarification about
Yeah, I don't want to
if there's
speak,
some sort of exception to the rule. Nope, go ahead.
no, I don't want to speak for Alachua County, but I think that it was more than just it went over 45 days. I think it was such a long amount of time over the statutory time frame that it just became the county attorney their position that it was de facto non-existent, making it a committee of 5, which is, I think that's kind of where they got. Otherwise, it was a referendum of the people with no ability to carry it out.
Would it be fair if the 45 days passes and we do not have a full board seated, that we could ask for an Attorney General's opinion on moving forward?
Absolutely. Yes, we can find a way to do something like that. I'm not sure what the status is of the opinions department through the pandemic of the Attorney General's office, but it's certainly a good idea.
So 45 days would put us in the middle of April. Do you want to set a date for that, or do you want me to send out something? Because it seems to me that we're not going to move forward. At this point, gives me time to learn a little bit more. And seek additional attorney opinions. I know I'm married to one. I could get 5 of them in the room and they'd have different opinions, so.
Madam Chair, if the names go in by this Friday, it would be, the third week of April would be post the 45 days, correct?
Yes.
So I think if we're looking at that third week of April, we would be safe to know if the governor was able to meet the timeframes.
Okay.
I know that there's a lot of spring break stuff going on around that time, so we need to be careful
Well,
with the
our
calendars.
spring breaks are in March, so,
Okay, good.
yeah. So the third week would be the 19th through the 23rd of April. As I've said, I have a standing obligation on Mondays at 5, from 5 to 6. And I had been wanting to kind of throw out the first Tuesday of every month as a possibility, but that would be before, and I didn't know whether other people would be available on the first Tuesday. I know the Thursdays are out for the commissioner. I know the third Tuesday is out for school board.
Oh, well, then we have a problem with the third week, because,
So
It's 6 early, you can do it, Honorable Judge.
No, I could do 5:30.
I can't hear you, Mr. Commissioner May.
No, I'm sorry, madam. I was asking the judge, what's the earliest she could do a meeting?
Yeah.
If 6 o'clock is the earliest, that's fine, but.
I could do 5:30. I mean, I could really even do probably 5:15, but the problem is that if Monday's a problem, we could do Tuesday, but Wednesday, I hear Wednesday and Thursday are both. Oh, no, you
Tuesday,
said
the
Tuesday's
20th is school board meeting.
Oh, wait, the 20th. I'm sorry, I thought we were,
What dates are we considering?
oh, I'm sorry.
We're looking at, I think what we decided was that it would be the third week in April.
Okay, so did you say the meeting was on the April 20th?
I can't do April, I can do
We
the
can't do the
19th or I can
20th.
do the 27th. I can't do the 20th.
Madam Chair, it might be good to go to the fourth week, because if the announcement is coming out on the 15th of April, it might not be time to at least have those members know their calendars are ready 1 week later, so the fourth week might be better.
I
The
concur.
27th, April 27th, we shouldn't have a board meeting then. County Commission shouldn't meet. What about you, Judge?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, we can do it. Would the chambers be open, Madam Administrator, on the 27th? Oh, y'all already checked it, okay.
Yeah, I asked her earlier to come prepared to give me availability in this chamber. I also have checked on whether we could do it in a different location. Our school board meeting room also could be available. We have to make sure that their TV can talk to our TV, but other than that, we can broadcast from our school
Are
board.
we live on television, Madam Administrator?
Yes.
We are.
Madam Chairwoman, would you like to meet at 5:30 and then schedule it till later because of that, or do we want to?
Let's start at 5:30 and, you know, I think I'm one of those people that, you know, I think we still go just to 8 because it gets too long. People get fidgety and their brains go home. So, but we will, at that point, if we don't have the additional 5 members, then we're still where we are today. Unless, so I'm going to have some conversations with Ms. Rogers and see what we can figure out about moving forward. Because if we don't have them by then and it's still the opinion that we are not viable, I'm just really worried because I don't want us to miss that trim notice. And so I'll have some conversations with Ms. Rogers and Mr. Ritchie and read this book and figure out what can be done to move that forward without, because we can't, I guess we could, but you know, what we've been hearing tonight is we need to figure out what it is we want to use the money for in order to decide how much money we want to collect. And so if we start that in April, I'm worried about that, being able to get that. We're going to be meeting maybe weekly.
Madam Chair, I recommend that at the end of March, we do a check-in with the governor's office to see if they're on task for the 15th. And if not, we go ahead and write an AGO opinion request so that at the end of April, we might have an answer. Because if you get to April and we're not seated, it'd be good to have the answer at that meeting if we can move forward. Now, they may not be able to do it in 3 weeks, but if we get started 1 April on that request, we'll at least have it in the messaging. And I don't know how the AGO opinions are going either, but every now and then they're fast when it's a priority. So we could ask for a priority processing. It's a pretty quick question. And they're not unfamiliar with Children's Services Councils.
Right. All right. Does everybody understand what we're doing now? I did a lot of work for nothing.
It wasn't for nothing. Eventually, it will be necessary.
I know that there are a lot of disappointed people sitting out there that were hoping that we were going to be moving forward, but you know, we want to be legal. We want to do it in full sunshine. We want to be as transparent as possible because what we put in place needs to work and it needs to be a viable process. And we don't want somebody coming back, as the judge says, after we've done all of this and said you were out of order. You were not a legal entity to be able to do all that. So I trust the fact that you're here. You're going to help us I mean, because you're going to help us, because those are the things that we need to know, because all of us, we're all learning this as we move along, and we're all anxious to be able to get funds into the hands of our community, because we know there's a lot of need out there, and there are a lot of people that are suffering. But we don't want to do it incorrectly. We want to make sure that what we do is in the best interest of all concerned. So I appreciate you being here. Is there anyone here to speak at public forum? I couldn't understand a word you said. Come on up. You can give the form to Ms. Buswell.
Madam Chair, while she's
My name is Claudia Litchfield, and
Claudia.
pardon me.
I couldn't
My
recognize you.
big concern with the group and pushing back the start date for the process, and I totally understand the legal aspect of it, but I would like to suggest the possibility of the group members coming up already with areas of need that they already have in different aspects. I know that probably the people who created the referendum have ideas of areas that already are in need. So to start the process of looking into assessments and figuring out the numbers and figuring out the possibility of how that money might be able to get spent, so that some of those steps are already started prior to waiting the 45 days and then starting the process.
Thank you so much. And that is an excellent, because we know that in order to put the referendum out there and to get the 61% support, it was because they had done their work. They presented what the needs were, and that is an excellent starting point. And that was why I had Ms. Watson talk about the fact that you might not need to have to do a study totally again, because
Exactly.
they have
And-
done those things.
And to use the resources that are being offered by people volunteering. I mean, I know that Mr. May said that the commission is offering different services, but I think the community in general is open to helping to come up with different areas of need. And if there's paperwork that needs to be done, that we as a community, because that's the whole point of this, we as a community to step in and make phone calls to the governor and say, we need for this position to be filled as soon as possible because we have a major need due to COVID. And I think COVID has been a major issue, and for me, it's been low test scores and kids needing mentorship and just different programs and in need of food, and there's just too many things happening. And for us to continue to wait and not do something is very difficult.
Thank you, Ms. Litchfield. Anyone else? I will be calling you, Ms. Rogers, so,
Madam Chair,
Yes.
we moved from one thing to another so quickly, and I'm sure that was probably in part my fault, but I did want to give a round of applause for our applicants and our shortlisters, so to speak, and those people who have joined us here tonight. We so greatly appreciate you and your willingness to serve and be here, and for those online too. So congratulations to you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you so much.
that was the last line of my script.
Madam Chair, on the April agenda, I definitely think the trim workshop should be agended regardless, because I think even if it's just the five of us, the trim workshop would be really beneficial. It might be part one and part two in the same meeting, but I don't think we should get past April without that workshop for sure.
Commissioner May, you have your light on?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and I certainly am not going to be an obstruct of progress, and I think there is an opportunity for us to get our consultant, our interim person on board. I think we figure out that funding source, because you have to have a person to set up this mechanism. I agree with you. I mean, you're on a volunteer board, so at some point we're going to have to get that. I don't think anything prohibits us from actually individually or collectively or transition team continuing to have dialogue with the people that will be the recipients of this tax and that need the help. nor do I think that we, even if we don't see it and can't do bylaws, stop some entity, someone from being able to find us the opportunity to provide the administrative help that we're going to get. And so I agree. Let's move it forward as quickly as possible. But I'm not going to politically be pushed into a corner by anybody that says, well, we got to do it ASAP. Poverty, delinquency has existed for the last 30 years. And so if it takes another 3 or 4 months to get it right, then we got to get it right. And so politically, if someone has to make a decision to have a program that does good for this community, then hopefully politically we'll have that will to do it. And so like anybody, I'm very concerned about what's happening in our community. And I'd like to save every life that I can possibly save. But if I get it right, I might not save 1 life, I may save 5 lives. And so it's important for this committee, that's a $100 million committee, to get it right from the beginning, because you can't go back if you don't start with a solid foundation. And so I'm proud of my position on my record. If it becomes something that others are opposed to, I apologize to that, but I certainly want to make sure that we get it right for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Can we make a motion to adjourn? If there's no objection, we're adjourned.